Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Flames, in which the Sharks lost 8-5. This is a much higher scoring affair than the previous meeting between these two teams. The Sharks were the victors in that one, 3-1. And so an offensive explosion between these two offensively gifted teams is not too much of a surprise, but I guess if you were to compare it to that first game that they did play, it is. But the Flames got the better of them, and so the Sharks, who had the chance to supplant the Flames for first place in the Pacific Division, will remain at 49 points. In third place, the Flames will secure their spot in first place by jumping up to 52, ahead, of course, of the Golden Knights, who are second place at the moment. This game did not start off super offensively. The Flames got the first goal. It was Backlund. Then the Sharks tied it up with Radil, but then the Flames started to get the snowball rolling, and they never relinquished the lead at any point in this game after that. Backlund and Tkachuk added goals, made it 3-1 by the end of the first period. The Sharks came back rather early on in the second, got a goal from Brent Burns to make it 3-2 Flames, but then it was Tkachuk again, and it was 4-2. Then, near the end of the second period, Jonas Donskoy scored. He made it 4-3. It was looking like the Sharks maybe would go into the period only down by 1, but then Lindholm in the last 30 seconds makes it 5-3. We come into the next period, and it's Jonas Donskoy. He makes it 5-4, but then it goes to 6-4, and then it goes to 7-4, and then it goes to 8-4 with goals from Goodrow and Neal. Joe Thornton makes it 8-5, but at that point the game was basically out of reach. There was no celebration from the team at all, and the Flames end up winning it 8-5. I'll get a bit later to how I feel about this game. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is Aaron Dell, because this is a very interesting talking point because the fact that Aaron Dell actually played this game. This was not a back-to-back. Jones hadn't played an insane amount of games in a row. I believe Aaron Dell got the start in the back-to-back against the Kings and the Arizona Coyotes. I believe he got the start against the Coyotes. So it's not like Jones would necessarily be tired, especially coming off of a Christmas break. So the only reason I could see was that Dell is from the area of, he's from the Calgary area, but that just seems like such a horrible reason. And I'm not going to say that Martin Jones, if he was in nets, the Sharks would have guaranteed win this game, but I do struggle to see if Martin Jones lets in 8 goals himself. I'm not 100% sure. Dell didn't get much support, but he also didn't really come up with too many great saves. He had a couple, certainly on the Sam Bennett breakaway. You definitely have to give him credit for that one. A couple other opportunities that he was able to make big saves, but he lets in 8 goals. It's hard to say that your goaltender was fantastic letting in 8 goals, and so it's just so strange, especially since the Sharks' first game against the Flames, the Sharks won 3-1. As I said, Martin Jones was spectacular in that game, maybe one of his best, if not his best game of the season, and yet for some reason DeBoer decides not to go back to his starting goaltender, and it's in fact a divisional game that could give the Sharks first place in the division. There are so many reasons why the Sharks should have started Martin Jones, and yet for some reason, as I said, DeBoer decides to go with Aaron Dell. He gets punished for that, and the Sharks end up losing it 8-5. So I guess we'll see Martin Jones in net for the next one against the Colorado Avalanche, but it just seems like a bit of an odd choice. Next is Brent Burns. Now, as I said, many of the Sharks players were very bad defensively tonight. I said that there were probably not a single player on this team who didn't make a bad play defensively at some point. But I think at the top of that heat, Meyer and Hurdle were not very good. Of course, Kane wasn't that great. Defensively, of course, all of these players. But at the top, it has to be Brent Burns. Brent Burns actually had a pretty good game when it comes to the offensive side. He scored a goal. I believe he also had an assist. He was getting some decent chances as well that he was unable to convert on after that. But, so you might give him a B plus and an A minus for something when it comes to the offensive opportunities. But when it comes to the defensive game, he was a -4, and he definitely deserved that -4. He gets an F in that category. There's so many poor misplays. On the first goal, he gives this puck away. On the James Neal goal, which was a very important goal as the Sharks were only trailing 5-4 at this point, he ends up, for some reason, following Sam Bennett all the way up instead of exchanging with Evander Kane, who was easily going to cover Sam Bennett, then runs into Kane to take both of them out of the play. So just another terrible play by him. A bad play on, I think it was Goodrow's first goal. And so just in general, Brent Burns had a terrible game defensively. In the past couple of games, I've mentioned how Brent Burns had interesting games because he was solid offensively but somewhat shaky defensively. It wasn't just somewhat shaky defensively. It was just absolutely terrible defensively tonight. Brent Burns needs to get this cleaned up, and it's something that I've noticed with Brent Burns, but also some other Sharks players, is for some reason the Sharks have such a unwillingness to play the man, to box out, and for some reason they always just go for the pass the pass interceptions. I understand when you're doing that for like one-timer type of passes, like up high, but when a player is standing in front of the net or something like that, and then for some reason our players are standing in the passing lane hoping to intercept this pass, but if the pass gets through, the goal is going to be scored almost guaranteed. I mean, look at the 6th goal by James Neal. This pass is one, I think it is from Sam Bennett, if I'm not mistaken, and for some reason Tomáš Hertl, instead of covering James Neal, who's alone in front of the net, he is like in between both Bennett and Neal trying to intercept this pass. Yes, technically if he does get it, he could get it going the other way for an offensive opportunity, but I'd rather he make the much safer defensive play, box out James Neal from the front, and try to keep it just a 1-goal deficit. But instead the Sharks find themselves down by 2, eventually down by 4, and they end up losing that game. And so it's a Brent Burns problem. It's really a Sharks problem at this point, and as I said, one of the worst defensive games played so far this season, and Brent Burns was the main culprit of that. Next is the rough stuff. Of course, this game ended up getting quite chippy near the end of it. There were multiple instances. I think it mostly started off with Sam Bennett, where the Flames scored a goal, but it was called off for goal interference. Arundel did not seem to like that. Eventually, later on in this game, Arundel gives a big slash to the leg of Sam Bennett, somehow goes unpenalized. But the Sharks were definitely frustrated in this game. Kevin Labanc took a bad slashing call. He got very upset as well. Just multiple things. Evander Kane getting into it, many players getting into it with Matthew Tkachuk, of course, as he's always at the center of all of this rough stuff. And then, of course, the main play by the end of this game is Sam Bennett laying a huge hit onto Šimek, arguably quite dirty. It's certainly a very terrible decision making. I mean, the last 20 seconds of the game, and you're gonna lay like a 2 seconds late hit in type of interference call. There's absolutely zero reason to do that. If this was like a 1-goal game, sure, 20 seconds, something can happen. This is a 3-goal lead for the Calgary Flames. There is nothing that's going to happen in these last 20 seconds, and yet Sam Bennett, just such a reckless, such an idiotic play, I don't even know what the word would be for this. It's just such a poor choice for Sam Bennett to make a play like this. It's dumb, and I don't know if he's going to get suspended for this. Maybe this just ends up being the interference call and that's the end of that, but it was just such a bad decision-making play from Sam Bennett. It's disgraceful, I guess I could call it, but going to be a very interesting meeting between these two teams the next time they play. They're now 1-1 in that series, and so I think it's sometime in early February, so I guess it's a date to circle on the calendar. Finally, we have to talk about playoff teams, and this is where I'm going to come to how the Sharks actually played tonight in terms of, actual gameplay besides when it comes, besides the defensive aspects of it, because the Sharks have had a very nice record for, I guess, most of December thus far since the end of that long road trip where they finished off against the Montreal Canadiens. But the thing that's very important to mention is besides like a few niche wildcard teams like the Stars, the Canadiens, the Ducks, the Sharks have only played 2 games against actual contenders, that being the Winnipeg Jets, and then of course tonight against the Calgary Flames. These are the top 2 teams in the Western Conference, and by contenders, of course, I mean these 2 teams like a Nashville, a Tampa, a Toronto, a Washington, a Pittsburgh. And the 2 times that they have played, they've lost both, and they've let in a total of 13 goals in those 2 games. And the Winnipeg Jets game, it was a bit more positive because I thought the Sharks had a very good game in that one, and they just ended up losing to a couple of bad bounces and everything like that. Tonight, it was not like that. The Sharks actually just did not play that well defensively, as I said. When it comes to the offensive side, there were moments of this game where the Sharks were dominant. Of course, the Flames didn't actually register a shot in the second period for the first, I believe it was 10 minutes. Although I think their first or second shot of that period ended up being Matthew Tkachuk's goal to make it 4-2, and so it's a hollow victory, I guess you could say. But when the Sharks forced the Calgary Flames to play their game, which was a much more sort of forechecking, gritty type of game like that, the Sharks were actually the much better team. It was only when the Flames managed to open up the ice, find those holes, get some great chances where they could use players like Johnny Gaudreau's speed or, Elias Lindholm's skill to open up the ice. That was when the Flames were able to strike multiple times, where the Sharks just let themselves be opened up defensively, and that's where the main misplays happened. If the Sharks can somehow clean that up, that would be good, because we also saw it against the Jets. Even in a well-played game, Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, with their skill, they were also able to open up the Sharks defensively, which allowed them to get a couple of good chances, which ended up winning the game for the Jets. So when it comes to these main contenders, and of course the Sharks, I would not know if I would call the Avalanche the game coming up, but the next game after that against the Tampa Bay Lightning, if the Sharks don't have this cleaned up against the Lightning on Saturday, it's going to be even worse than the 8 goals they let in against the Calgary Flames, because if they thought the Flames were an offensively gifted team, just wait until the Tampa Bay Lightning. If they play like that, I wouldn't be surprised to see some double-digit goals from the Tampa Bay Lightning that night, because it would not be pretty. But that will be the end of this review. The Sharks will be back in action. As I said, they will be playing against the Colorado Avalanche in their next game. Should be a game where the Sharks will look to get back on track. There was a tough one tonight, but of course they did just beat the Edmonton Oilers 7-4, so I guess what goes around comes around when it comes to the offensive-defensive style of hockey. And the Sharks will just be looking to get back into the win column as they continue this rough stretch of games against tough opponents. Class dismissed.